Okay, and we are going on to the next one, which is personality disorders. And please make sure to pause and kind of jot down things. And we're going to jump right in. This is the last one of the disorders that we're going to cover for this class. Okay, so personality disorder is basically characterizing which this is the person's personality is a problem. It tends to be problematic, it could be abnormal, and it leads to distress or impaired interactions with others, right? That interactions with other people. This is a very controversial disorder in the DSM-5 because one, it's subjective, and two, people may just say like, oh, that's just who they are. Okay. Now, there's four things that need to be featured in order to be considered a personality disorder. And those four things are, we're writing that down, is going to be distorted thinking, right? The way that they think is very much distorted from the reality of stuff. They have interpersonal difficulties, which is relationships with people. They have problems with impulse control, and then they have problems with emotional responses. Okay, it tends to be a little bit more erratic. Now, please keep in mind, this is not your space to diagnose anybody, okay, with these personalities, because you're going to see a lot of characteristics that some people may exhibit. However, keep in mind that most of these under personality disorder, you need to have 5 or more characteristics of these things. Now, I'm not going to list all of them, so there's more to that. So don't think just because, oh, somebody has like 2 of them means that that person has the disorder. No, we are not ones to diagnose, and there's a little bit more to it. Okay? All right. So the way that they kind of divide personality disorder is in 3 clusters, okay? And the first one is cluster A. So cluster A, and writing this down, are typically personalities that are odd, suspicious, or eccentric, right? Like kind of like this like really odd and weird type personalities, okay? Now, typically they have patterns of like paranoia, they'll have social isolation, okay, and they'll have like cognitive or perceptual distortions of their reality, okay? And then they'll have like really eccentric behaviors, doing things kind of like out of the ordinary, that is not within like the social norms or socially acceptable, okay? And under cluster A, there are 3 personality disorders, and they are, the first one is the paranoid personality disorder, and this is when they have typically a pattern of distrust and suspicious, right, of other people, like people are out to hurt them. It's exactly what it means, paranoid, okay? They tend not to have relationships with people because they believe that everybody is out to get them, okay? Now, schizoid personality disorder is a detachment from social relationships, and they also have like restricted like emotional expression. So this is more of like very isolated people that they cannot have like social relationships even with family members, okay? And then the schizotypal is basically that they're uncomfortable in with close relationships. There's a cognitive like distortion of reality of like what happens, and then they also are very eccentric in their behaviors, okay? Now, we're gonna have cluster B, okay? Cluster B are more dramatic and emotional, and then also erratic, right? Like they'll tend to kind of like it's a show, right? And we'll go a little bit into that, okay? And for here, there's 4, um, like 4 personality disorders, and the first one is going to be um, antisocial personality disorder, okay? And this is typically where you'll see the people that have like the criminals or the social paths, like what people would call, this is kind of what the antisocial personality is. And this is somebody that is unable to feel any empathy or guilt. And so since they don't feel that, they typically disregard the rights of others or the safety of others. They tend to be very irritable and aggressive. They tend to pick a lot of physical fights or they assault people. Okay. And they also are very deceitful. They will lie, very manipulative. Okay. That's just some of the characteristics. And again, there needs to be more than five. So just keep that in mind. The next one is going to be borderline personality disorder. And this is basically where they have very unstable, the instability of interpersonal relationships, and their self-image. Okay. Now they tend to avoid real or imagined abandonment. Okay. So they do anything that's possible to make sure that their relationship doesn't end, right? Or their fear. They tend to be impulsive and with self-damaging things such as like substance abuse, spending a lot of money. They can have multiple partners. Okay, they have a lot of recurrent suicidal behaviors, and then they have difficulty controlling their anger. Okay, they tend to be the more explosive in relationships with people, is the borderline. Then we have the histrionic personality disorder, and this is basically that they're excessively emotional. They tend to be attention seeking. They're uncomfortable if they're not like in the center of attention. They interact with people really inappropriately. They tend to either be like really seductive or provocative in the way they interact because they want to be like the center of attention. They tend to also be very like dramatization, like exaggerating their emotions, kind of like dramatic, right? And then they typically think like relationships are more intimate and close than they actually are. Okay, they think like you're the best friend and they just met. Okay, then the next one is going to be the narcissistic personality disorder. And this one is that the person believes like very much like a grandiose um, um, uh, appearance or thought that they are like super important. They exaggerate like their talents and achievements, like, kind of like I'm God type thing. There's a constant need for admiration from others. They lack empathy. They're preoccupied with like unlimited success and power, and they will take advantage of others to get to where they want to. And then they're either envious of others or think that people are envious of them. Okay, this is a really controversial one because there's a lot of, they're saying that because of our very individualistic culture, that Western culture has a lot more, like feeds into the sorry, the narcissistic personality disorder. Okay, and then cluster C is basically where you have more anxious or fearful. And then there's three under that one, and that one is avoidant personality, and that's basically that they will like basically avoid um and like people or relationships because they feel they have a huge fear of um like being evaluated in a negative way or seen in a negative way. They have a big feeling of inadequacy all the time, like they feel like they're not enough. And they'll avoid, any type of activity that they could be seen and evaluated or embarrassed, because that's their fear. Then you have the dependent personality disorder. And this one, they have a huge fear of being shamed or ridiculed in an intimate relationship. So they tend to preoccupy like they're afraid of being rejected. So then they are excessively the need to be taken care of. So it leads kind of like to they're more submissive, right, in relationships and very clingy. They basically cannot be separated from their partners or people. They're asking always for advice or reassurance because they can't make any decisions. They don't assume any responsibilities, okay? And they can't initiate projects or anything on their own, right? Like they're very dependent. Okay, and then the last one is the obsessive compulsive personality disorder. Not the same thing as OCD because OCD is more of like the behavior they're doing is to release the anxiety, right? Or to slow down the anxiety a little bit. This one's a little bit different in which that they're constantly preoccupied with orderliness, perfectionism, and like mental and interpersonal control. They want to be able to control everything. They tend to have no flexibility or openness. They're very much preoccupied about rules, the details, order. And then like their perfectionism, it actually interferes with completing a task because every like they won't be able to finish something because everything needs to be perfect. Um, and they also can't even get rid of things. It's not hoarding because there's no value. They just cannot get rid of it. Okay, and that's basically it for the personality disorders, and we're done. Next up is the types of therapies.